Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you another art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Founded over 60 years ago, the DuPage Art League is dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and public programs like this one. We are grateful to the Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration with acclaimed artist Jill Stevens. Jill has always been fascinated by the grain, texture, density, and figuring of wood, considering it a gift from nature. By utilizing stains, dyes, and finishes, she creates shapes, patterns, and depth to present a bold new perspective on architecture, landscapes, and the human form. Please join us in welcoming Jill.
Thank you for having me. So I come from Wisconsin. I live in a very small town of about 4,000 people in the Madison area, but I grew up here in DuPage County. And in fact, my neighbor growing up, Pat Kosar, is a member of the league and put my name in the hat for this program, and that's how I got here. So thank you again for having me. A little fun fact, I'm going to embarrass my mom. Growing up, she did paint and she dabbled in art, and she actually won an award through the DuPage Art League, probably 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It was a sculpture, but anyway, sorry, just embarrass you. But I feel like I have a little bit of legacy with your program. I guess I want to start out by saying that I am a very new artist. I started my career less than 2 years ago. I don't have any background in art, and I do not have an art degree. I was a hobby artist and just created a couple pieces a year, entered local small exhibitions, volunteered on in art organizations, and then once my kids grew up, I decided to try to make a go of it. And I was developing this unique form of art, and so here I am. So my medium is wood, as you can see. And so today I'm going to talk to you about my journey into making art with wood, and also kind of like how I'm making my own brand, like my own type of art, and using innovation with a lot of different tools to come up with a new type of art. So being new to the art scene, it's really saturated right now with artists, probably because of social media. It's kind of like music, right? You don't have to wait for a record label to pick you up. You can just put it out on YouTube. Well, art is the same way. You don't have to wait for a gallery to show your art. You can just put it out on social media, and there are a ton of artists out there with a ton of followers selling art on social media. There's also art festivals. They started in the 80s in Florida, and they keep growing, and they're really big in the Midwest. And so I've been doing art festivals, but there's a ton of competition, and it's like I said, it's saturated. Like the better art festivals, there'll be like 1,500 artists that apply, and they only have 150 positions open. So having a unique type of art, and it being wood, and I'm a woman, has really, I think, helped me navigate through some of that. And so that's what I'm also going to talk about. So I was watching one of the videos that Barry sent me, was a woman, I think it was during the pandemic, because it was all Zoom, and she was making portraits, weaving them, right? And so my art is kind of similar to that, because she used a lot of innovation to create a new type of art and a lot of technology with a medium that's been around forever. So I guess I also want to call out my family a little bit because they're here. I don't have an art background, but I grew up in a really, really creative family. So my parents here believed in making everything. Why buy it when you can make it? And so everything in our home, from like an example, our toilet paper holder that's been there for my entire life, right? I think, I don't know, my mom made it, or my dad made it out of wood. My mom carved flowers in it, I mean, every little detail. Like, we'd never buy a curtain, right? Or a valance. All the woodwork was done by my father. So I think wood was a good way for me to bring both art and design with that kind of, natural craving, I guess, to create and build. So with that, let's get started with the slideshow. Okay, so Okay, that's a video. So this is just an introduction to what I do. Is there volume? I do, yes. Okay, well, there is music to this, but. So this is actually this piece right here. This was my very first reel that I posted on Instagram. So that's why it's in portrait and not landscape. So this is basically my process. So we're going to take this apart. This is just the Cliff Notes. That's actually cold wax that I'm putting on the wood. Yes, it is. And there it is. And that's my studio. Okay, next. Okay, so this is what I do. I take a bunch of pieces of wood, okay, and like in here, there's mahogany and there's some cherry, lots of maple. I use paint, I use dyes, I used all sorts of different techniques. And then next, I put it together. Okay, so all of these actually, I'm gonna demonstrate with some of these. I make quite a few of these. This actually says love, L-O-V and E. They're kind of my answer to a print. I do have a CNC, so I don't sell a lot of prints because it's wood, right? So I do reproduce some of these small pieces and sell them at a lower price point. So, but these, the technical name for this is 2D relief. So it's actually technically a form of sculpture, but because I use different pieces of wood of different thicknesses, there's actually relief to it. So some people call it assemblage or mosaic, but there's relief to it. When we were in Sheboygan at an art festival, we had a really cool experience. There were a couple people, woman, and then separately a child that were blind. And so they're explaining the art to them. We said, well, go ahead and feel it. So all my pieces, everything is finished completely like furniture. So it can be touched, it can be wiped down. And so we let kids touch the art too, and it doesn't bother it at all. It's just like furniture. So next. So what I do is I look around and I look for patterns in shapes. This is an irrigation field. Okay, next. And then I cut a bunch of shapes and I finish them. So again, different types of wood. Okay, next. And then put it together to form. So this is actually an abstract landscape. Okay, next. Here's an example. So I live in Wisconsin and there's lots of corn up there and where I live. And this time of year especially, it's being harvested. So this is a piece I did last year. So I look for, again, shapes and how I can manipulate them with wood, because everything I do has to be a shape. Like when we draw, we actually draw with shapes too, but I have to simplify it even further. So next. So this is the finished piece. That's how it turned out. And this is oak in here. This is mahogany, and there's some walnut over here, and there's some cherry. And then I mixed it in with some acrylic paints too. So I just use, this is all wood dye on oak, and this is maple up here for the sky. So I just take the wood and think about grain direction and shape and color and thickness and put it all together. Okay, next. So wood art's been around for a long time. So this obviously is not mine. This is Nevelson's, but she was such a pioneer in her time, and like in the 1950s or mid-century, and she was, criticized by the critics because her art was so new and different. So she was actually an assemblage artist, but she did, some wall hangings kind of similar, and it was relief, right? But she painted everything black with spray paint. But nowadays, it's different. Nowadays, everyone is searching for a new innovative way, and they don't label art like it's paint, or it's just sculpture. It can be a little bit of everything. So next. This is George Morrison's. So he is a Native American Indian artist, probably known more for his paintings, but he did do some wood too that are quite famous. And this is one of them. And this again is similar to mine. Okay, next. This is Georgia O'Keeffe, not a wood artist, of course, but she grew up, was and raised about 20 minutes from where I live. And she has been an inspiration to me because she is so brilliant at taking very complex landscapes and objects and simplifying them. And so that's what I try to do too. Okay, next. Here's another one that she did. This is she probably took this from a very complex landscape with the reflection in the water, but she was able to simplify it with very defined shapes. Okay, next, please. Okay, so here's how I got started. These are my first tools. So I had my first house, and I wanted some crown molding. I think I was pregnant. I was going in the nursery. I have all that energy. And so I decided I'm just going to do it myself, right? So I bought a book. And I went and bought, this is not the one I have because I don't have it anymore. Mine was black and plastic, and it came with this little back saw, right? So I did it all by hand. And this is my actual coping saw. It belonged to my grandfather. It's actually one of my prized possessions. And so that's how it all started. And it was actually a complex room, but it was a lot of fun, and it just got me going with wood. Okay, next. Okay, so then from there, I had a friend whose husband worked for Sears, like back when Sears had the big department stores. And so he got an employee discount. So like a couple years later for Christmas, I was like, I want power tools, So we went there and we got to use his discount. And this is what I bought. Now these tools are more geared towards trim carpentry. Got a nail gun over there. These are my actual tools. And this was a 10-inch compound miter saw, and I still have the saw and I still use it. I have a second one, but I still use this one, and this dirty grungy thing, and still use that one too. So okay, next. Okay, then when I decided I wanted to do art a little bit, I bought a Craftsman scroll saw. And then I picked up at a garage sale a table saw. Now that is not my table saw, but that's exactly what it looked like. I think it was from like the 70s. I think I paid like 40 bucks for it. My neighbor across the street, was his dad's. And it was like so weak. I'd be if I was cutting like oak or something hard, the blade would just stop. So I'm on my third table saw from that one. So we'll revisit my newest table saw later on. Okay, next. So this was my very first wood piece that I did. And so this was probably 9 years ago, I'm thinking. I was asked by our local arts council to co-chair a committee to put up a pop-up gallery. So there's a gallery, there's a marketplace, workshop, blah, blah, blah. And so my friends and I came up with, you can't read all the titles down there, but it was, the title was Quietly Loud for the exhibition. So artists were to create art with Quietly Loud in mind. And so I chose Rosa Parks, this is her mugshot, because her actions, her very quiet action was a very quiet protest that really changed our country. So, I used just those simple tools. I used which was actually very dangerous. I made some very small cuts with that big blade really close to it. But I just used that miter box, and I used the scroll saw. And these are some exotic woods mixed in. This was just plywood that I had around. And I ordered Kata dyes from Amazon. You can get their powdered dyes, and they're the same dyes they use to color electric guitars. And the Katas are really cheap. Pack of 5, like I said, $25, $30. And that's what I used. And then I cut everything. I did a little bit. This was pyrography. And her face was ash. This was walnut. And that was my very first piece. Okay, next. So I did this one for the exhibition also, and this was my daughter. So I had in my mind, because I've been working with wood and doing a lot of trim carpentry around the house and for my friends, I just loved wood grain. And I always had this idea in the back of my head to take these different species of wood and create art with it. So I had this in my mind, and I took this picture of my daughter probably a year or two before I even made the art. And so for this, it's mainly oak, walnut, and cherry. And I did some darker staining, and then I painted her with acrylics. And I went to the local cabinet maker and I dug through his dumpster. So I got all the wood was repurposed in this one. So that's how I started out. But then like once you get busier, then you just need your wood and you need what you want. You can't, it takes those people that use all repurposed wood it's really, really hard to do. So, okay, so that was my start. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a video. And there's no sound. You can't hear my equipment going. So it's morphed into this.
Excuse me, Jill, we've got a question back here.
Yes?
How large is this space?
Not large enough. I'm so cramped sometimes. I hurt myself. I run into stuff, It's a 2-car garage with like a 2.5-car garage. So I don't know what that is, like 30 by 25. It's not very big. I suppose so, yes. The biggest thing, like wood storage is really tough. It's on a lake. It's a beautiful space. But yeah, I mean, I do dream of having a bigger space for sure. So yeah. Okay, next. Oh, that's a video. Oh, I threw this in because my sister is going to be here. If you're here, I'm going to probably talk about you. So a couple of weeks ago, we did this artist tour we participated in. And so we had to clean the studio. So we were up to like 11 o'clock at night cleaning, okay? And so it was so funny. This really happened. So then a week later, a man comes to pick up a piece of art. He calls me and he's like, oh, I want to buy this art. I want to pick it up today. And so he comes in and I straightened up my house. They knew he'd be coming in my house, but not the workshop. And he's like, oh, I brought a friend. We want to see your workshop. And she's like, oh, he told me how pristine it is. Well, okay, if you have a workshop, right? Like it was pristine for about 48 hours. And that was like the duration of the artist tour. So I had taken these videos. I even like put all my plywood outside and covered it. It would really look nice and neat, like no work was done there. But I was going to make a reel and then we actually got really busy. It was a lot of fun. So I have a really great sister. I mean, anyone that's going to come vacuum your power tools. But she really does a lot for me. So, okay, next. So that's what she was vacuuming. So this was for a Mother's Day. This is a 14-inch Craftsman bandsaw. I don't use this saw a lot, and I'll tell you why. Because of the sanding. You have to sand a lot. It kind of burns the wood. So, but it comes in handy a lot. And one thing about this saw is anyone who works with wood in here, you can really cut thick stock if you want. You can raise the arm up. So, okay, next. Hope I'm not boring you with my tools. I love tools. Okay, so this is my new scroll saw. Okay, my Craftsman finally broke. It was a cheaper one. It was about a quarter of the price of this one. And then Craftsman, they don't really make their own power tools anymore. And that one, they completely discontinued the scroll saw. And a very important plastic part broke. And I tried to replace it, didn't work. So I was forced to go and buy this one. But it has a bigger table. I use this saw a lot because the blade is so fine. There's very little waste. And I mean, it just for the detail, like Nefertiti over there, I cut her entirely out on this saw. So next. So here's another piece just to demonstrate. I cut all of white. Okay, I didn't cut the triangles on that, but but I did the triangles I've got the 2 miter boxes, set them up, with a jig and went back and forth. And so I cut all the triangles. Okay, next. And then you can see here how I have it drawn out, the birds. And then all of those individual birds I cut on the scroll saw. And I was cutting with ebony, which is a very hard wood. So I went through a lot of blades, but it's also very expensive wood. So it's really, besides the detail, it's also nice to not waste wood. It's amazing how little I used for this project. There's two types. This is Crumlican ebony, and that's regular ebony. So, okay, next. Okay, here's my table saw. So this was a huge splurge, but just changed my world. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with saw stop. It's the saw that, you know, if you touch it, it will crash. I haven't crashed it yet, but you don't cut off your finger. So it's the most dangerous saw in the workshop, and it's what most people, you know, lose fingers with. So it was worth it to me to invest in this technology. This is the only brand. It's kind of funny, the story behind it. I'm probably not interested, but they didn't want to make saws. They tried to sell the technology. Bosch, no one wanted to buy it. So they ended up making their own saws, and now they like own the market. So I haven't crashed it yet. There's a cartridge in there. If you touch it, it's electrical. You complete this circuit and it'll just crash. And there's a cartridge that crashes right into the blade. It wrecks the cartridge, it wrecks the blade, and it's like a $200 mistake. So, but it's better than losing your finger. So I haven't crashed it yet. So, but anyway, I use that. Oh, anyway, thank you. I use this saw all the time. The table's so big. I use it before I have to roll mine out, you know, and sometimes I just use it as a table. You know, I was cutting all those birds on this. So it's just really become just a very natural part of my workshop. Okay, now you can go. Okay, so this is my CNC. This was another big purchase and changed my world. I've only owned this for 2 years. And what this did was this enabled me to be able to cut circles, because it is virtually impossible to cut a perfect circle by hand. And then also when you're fitting circles, right, then you got to fit it in there and sand it. So before I got this machine, I really didn't do circles, but now I do. And what it also did is I'm able to reproduce. I can do stuff like this. I do small tiles, the love pieces that I showed you. So it just opened my world. I wouldn't be able to create enough art if I didn't have this in my workshop. So next, please. Thanks. Here are my sanding table. We'll get to these later. I just have 3 power sanders. Anyone who works with wood knows there's a ton of sanding. Next. Here's my family of block sanders. So I got them all marked 120, 150, 220. That one's 100 and that one's 400. These are from Rockler. This was my dad's old one. I kind of stole it from him. He lent it to me. It's an awesome, you know, not all sanding blocks are created equally. And I have to say Rockler has the best one. So next. My wood supply, another thing besides all the equipment, a ton of wood. And so this is kind of funny. My older sister lives in Boston, was in town, and you know, I have a family that likes projects. So I was like, hey, want to do a project? She's like, yeah. I'm like, let's reorganize my wood. So this is a cart, and it was just a disaster. And I had the wood facing the other way. So we completely took out the wood, lined it up. She organized it by species, and I put dividers in it. And so voila. So this is all mainly thin stock. I have some 3/4 inch. So thin stock wood is anything that's a little bit thinner, and I use a lot of it. So I will just order it up, and it's all these different species. I have like this starts down with cedar and walnut, and there's some mahogany in there and some cherry, and then different types of maple. Here's figured maple. So all different types of wood, all different sizes. And so I order it up and store it there. Okay, next. I use a lot of plywoods too. So, because there's a lot of pieces of wood that are too big, right? The trees don't come that big. So I don't know if anyone's interested in the type of plywoods I use. They're all hardwood plywoods. I use MDF core. I use something called Pure Bond. So I get all of them from Canada. And some of them come actually from Home Depot because they sell their products, you know, only through Home Depot. This certain kind, and it's a different thickness. And then all my MDF core, I have to actually get from a lumber yard, and they're quite expensive. They're at least $100 per sheet, but I use a lot of maple I take that back. The oak's cheaper. I use oak for backboards, but this is where I store it. Again, it's on a cart. Everything in my studio is on wheels, so I can move it around. Okay, next. Okay, so into my process, this is how I start. I actually have this book here. I start with very, very small thumbnail drawings. And for me, it's easier for me to work on composition when it's really small. And then once I have it done, I'll come in with colored pencils and I'll kind of have my art done in miniature form. And then I'll blow it up, make a pattern, and start cutting it. So next, please. Okay, so here's one. So here's my drawing, and this was a little bigger, probably 8 by 10. This woman, this was actually my daughter. I had her modeling. She does not have red short hair. I just changed it up a little bit. But I had her model. This is the green skirt that I had sewn for a costume in high school. And it was this iridescent green skirt. So it's all about the skirt. So I had her put that on. And I was reading a book about Tamara de Lempicka, who was a Art Deco artist. And she did all those portraits. So I didn't know what to do with all this fabric. So I kind of took an Art Deco approach to it. So there's the drawing. And then this is tracing paper. I went right over it and I made a pattern. Okay, next. And you can see here, this is like the life-size pattern. And every single piece gets numbered. I think this piece had like 280 pieces in it altogether. And right now I just have the numbers, but as I get further into the project, I will go through. She had a lot of woods, a lot of exotics, purple heart, canary, a lot of different types of wood in these little pieces. And I would label either with a colored pencil, like, a mark or some sort of denotation so I know what it is. There's a lot of grain direction. There also will be a thickness. So I kind of make a pattern, a map, and then I just start cutting. So next. So this is what it looks like while I'm cutting it. So here's my pattern, everything numbered. See how the grain direction, like I have her skirt going this way, up here, through her body, it's going up here, this way. Her little halter top is going down this way. So I have keep in mind the movement in the piece and how I want the grain direction to go. Okay, next. From there, I will start coloring it. So you can see here, obviously I was working on the skirt and then I take pictures back. I use my phone camera a lot because I have to work flat. And so I have to see what I'm doing and see how it all fits together. And see here, I must have just finished that, like that's still wet. I was working on the background. So this is all with my wood dyes, which I'm going to show you that process. But it's still unfinished. And then the bodice, I think I made a stencil and I did that with acrylic. Okay, next. And then this is what it looks like. So I lay it all out and first what I do is I actually spray paint it with polyurethane and that seals in the stain. Otherwise, if you go to brush the polyurethane on, it'll drag some of the dyes up because it's water soluble. And so I spray it, seal it, and then it gets 3 coats of polyurethane, all sides. And so this is what it looks like. It's kind of creepy with the face because like, here's our eye socket, and it's like my daughter, unassembled, And then next, we put it all back together and there she is. So that was the finished piece. And so since it was kind of an Art Deco feel, I actually put copper in this one too. Some metal. They used a lot of metals during that era. And I do have some copper. So sometimes I'll put that in too. But a lot of these woods were natural, colored. And then a lot of them I did dye. So. Okay, next. Okay, here's another example of one of my patterns. And you can see how I have them color coded. Like this piece had 380 pieces of wood, all hand cut on my old scroll saw. I cut my finger a couple times. And then I actually used spray paint on it. That's why it's glossy. And they were birds. You'll see it later. They're actually birds. So there's like, 39A, 39B. So there's 2 pieces and to each bird. And okay, next. And that's what it looked like when it was done. So I live on a lake and the inspiration for this one was, I watch all these birds. It's called emergence. I watch them all land, especially during migration time. They all land and then they all come up. And so I was just trying to, with shapes, capture the chaos. And then another part of this one is, birds communicate, but they don't really know how. It's all this chaos, but they don't hit one another. So the design, all the birds are connected. So they're connected somehow. We really don't sure how they communicate. So, okay, next one. Okay, so this next project, I'm going to show you a little more in depth about my process. That is this piece right here. So about a month ago, I did a workshop for the Janesville Art League up in Wisconsin, and they do an annual thing where they do a workshop, and it's a hands-on workshop, and then this piece will get auctioned off. So I created the whole piece, all the wood. And then I had about 30 artists that did all the coloring. So we did a little workshop with coloring, and it was kind of fun. So since I did it for them, I have all the video footage of the process. So next. Okay, so on my computer, I created the outline. And then I can easily go in, since this one's on the computer, right? Then I can go in and just kind of take a look at, okay, what pieces do I want to color? What pieces don't I want to color? So I'll play around with that if it's done on the computer. This is in Illustrator. And so my process is first to create vector shapes in Illustrator. And this is if I'm using my CNC. Okay, so the CNC is that big machine. You'll see it. You can through the computer, you can program it to do your cutting for you. And that's how I can do these perfect circles. And the way you do that is you create vector shapes. Okay, next. Oh, okay, I threw this in here. So this is where I got the idea. I do these little tiles. I had this for Janesville because I didn't have the finished product. Okay, next, please. This is what it looks like all together. So it was that theme. They're 5-inch tiles, and that's how I came up with this. These are all 5 inches. Okay, next. So here's my pattern that I started out with in Illustrator. Next, please. And these are my basic shapes. So then I take these shapes and I save it in a DX format. And that's a format for saving vector shapes that can communicate with CAD, which is computer-aided design, right? And so next, please. So this is what it looks like on my computer. So here's what I did. I actually printed this out because I'm like, okay, it's a little bit of math, right? Little story problem. So I've got 5 pieces times, 6 times, 5 is, 30. So it ended up to be 150 pieces. And so first I have to calculate how many pieces I want of each shape. And then I have down here in the smaller print, okay, I need 30 maple, I need 10 alder, I need 10 cherry, 10 walnut, and then all the way up per shape, how many. And then I pull up the DXF file into a different software. And so there's all sorts of softwares out there that are made to communicate with the CNC machines. Okay, next. And so here I am calculating, okay, and laying out my shapes. So this is what my cut's going to look like. It's very technical. It's birch plywood, and this particular plywood was 0.24 inches. You got to get it right, or it doesn't cut all the way through, or it cuts too far, and the pieces get loose, right? And down here, it'll calculate, this is the size of my board. I used a lot of scrap pieces for this one. 1 hour and 7 minutes is what it took to cut it. Okay, next. And this is a video. I wish there was sound. You could hear my equipment. It's silence. It's not, it's loud. So that's what it looks like doing its work. I use router bits, and there's special bits for these machines. They're not the same bits you use on a regular router. And you can see it going right in there and cutting. So once it's programmed, it'll just do its thing. So that's that guy. Okay, next. Okay, this is also a video. So from here, I sand it with, this is 120 grit I start out with. And I like to sand them while they're still in the plywood because it protects the edges. Sometimes you can easily, especially like if it's sharp, you know, you can, the plywood has a very thin veneer. Okay, so go ahead, next. That's a video too. Okay. So now when you program it, you have to program it with tabs. Otherwise, the pieces will come loose and they'll get chopped up with the router bit. So now I'm cutting out the pieces. I put X's on all the backs of them because so many times I've finished the wrong piece, you know, the wrong side. And I'm putting it together, I'm like, oh, crap. So, so typically, you know, when I'm putting every piece gets a number, they start out with an X and then they get a number on the back and sometimes a color, what I want to do with it. Okay. So I sometimes, you know, it depending on how thick it is, you know, sometimes I'll use a chisel. And so. Okay. And those are my pieces. Okay, next. Okay, so I just thought I'd show you this machine. Sometimes it doesn't cut all the way through. So this is a scrap piece from my house. You can see it was already routed, but this is that I was just using some scrap wood up. This is a 3/8 inch solid walnut, and it didn't cut all the way through. So I'm using my little scroll saw to finish going through and cutting the pieces. So I just thought I'd throw that in. Okay, next. And there's all my pieces all cut. So there are lots of types of wood here. I have these pieces are walnut and cherry, and they're solid 3/8 inch thin stock wood. This is maple and cherry, and I'm sorry, walnut and cherry and maple. There is alder in here. Where's the alder? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I think this is alder. It's really similar. And yeah, this is the alder. So it's just slightly lighter than the cherry. And then all the pieces that I color are typically maple. I like maple. It has a nice grain. It just glows, as you can see if you get up close. Like this is like figured. It just really glows. So that's typically what I use. On faces, I'll use basswood for Nefertiti over there because of the smoothness. There's very little grain and the way it accepts the wood dye. Okay, next. So here are all my cuts. I think there were like 13 cuts. So you have to do a separate cut for every single wood species and every single thickness. And when you're trying to use up scrap wood like me, you might have to do 2 cuts because they're not big enough pieces. So while it's extremely accurate and it saves time, it's still quite time consuming to program all of that and set up all the cuts and set up your machine every single time. So this took quite a bit of time to cut all these pieces. Okay, next. Okay, this is a video. So on with the sanding. So now I have to sand all the edges. There's tabs and it's just a little rough. So this is one of my sanders. So I have to do this with every single piece. It's a lot of sanding. Anyone that works with wood knows that. To finish wood, you just have to sand it. There's no way around it. You know, like robots are becoming a thing. I was just telling someone I need a sanding robot. I really could use an art assistant. No, I really could. No, if my studio were bigger, I'm at the point I could really use an assistant to help with some of this. Aaron? No. Okay, this is a video too. So this is a fun one, a cylindrical sander. So there's all sorts of different sizes. So depending on what I'm doing, this has been a huge time saver. I used to, put my finger in there and try to get it, mess up my nails, So that's how I do all the tight circles with that. And it's kind of happy. It does a happy dance.
Is that someone else's hands?
No,
Those are yours.
those are my hands. I'm a one-man show in there. Unfortunately. Okay, this is a video too. So then after that, okay, then I will usually hand sand them with a finer grit just to make sure, go back around everything. Sometimes the palm sander can leave some marking. So you want to, finish it off with in the direction of the grain. And so it is quite time consuming. It is monotonous as it looks. I mean, it is, I just turn on the tunes and go, I have a big, right above, like a big dust extraction thing. It's an air purifier, and it helps, but it's a lot of dust and just a lot of work with your hands. There's no way around it. So, okay. So this is what it looked like when it was all together and sitting out and naked, not finished at all. Okay, next one. You can see the different thicknesses, right? This was 1/8 inch in here. All these little ones in here are a little bit shallower, and these are 3/8 of an inch. So, and then there's a very minor difference between these other 1/4 inch plywoods, and it just enhances the lines. You can see the lines better because of it. Okay, next one. And these are my people that I had coloring. You can just flip through these. So this was the Janesville Art League. And so we just sat around the table, and I had all the dies out, and they were first experimenting on their own. And then I handed out the little pieces, and they did all this. So go to the next one. Here's where they are again. There I am. Okay, next one. So then I took all the pieces home, and this is how they look when they're dry. They're kind of chalky looking, and you can't see the grain. And I lay them all out on cardboard on the floor. And this is where I put a coat of spray polyurethane. Okay, next. This is a video. And then I lay them out on my table. And now they get all wiped down with a tack cloth. So with this, it's a sticky, waxy cloth. And it gets rid of all the fine dust particles from the sanding before you put your finish coat on. It's quite tedious, but again, you have to do it. Otherwise, it gets messy. Okay, next. Now, this is a video too. So this is the polyurethaning. You can see like the wood color coming out. So I do all the sides and I do the tops. And then, so all the sides, they're all covered. And the reason I do this is, well, it looks nice, right? Because these are gonna be thicker, right? But it also keeps the moisture from getting into the wood. Wood expands and contracts. And so this sealing it will help keep it from warping and help it. I mean, it still will expand and contract, but not as much. Okay, next. So now I sand again. Okay, it's a video. So this is really light sandpaper, and you have to sand in between each coat of polyurethane. All the pieces get 3 coats of polyurethane. So I coat it, sand it, and stack them up, and then do it again. I know, it's a lot of work. Now you know why I spend so much time in my garage. So since I've been sanded now, that's me, those are my hands. That's not my robot, I wish. Okay. Oh, so now I gotta go get my tack cloth again. And it's time to wipe them all down before I put them back in place for the next coat. So that's what I do. Okay, it'll speed up. I just did it to show how long it takes. It takes a long time. So. Okay, then I take my next stack and I start over. And that's the way it goes until I get all the way through. So, okay, next one. Okay, so here's the finished product. This is a video too. So here they are, all glamorous. They just had their third coat. They're still a little glossy. Got the morning light coming in. And this is my favorite part. I never get tired of this because the wood is so beautiful. The third coat, they've been sanded and polyurethaned. And you can they just glow. They really do. They're so pretty. You can come up closely and look at them. It's just really, really pretty. And that's what they all look like together. So that's my world a lot. That's what it looks like on my table when I'm finishing the pieces. So, okay, next. This is also a video. So this I threw in there. This is how I make frames for behind all of my pieces. And this is something I had to come up with the wood. Since my backing that I use is all MDF core, and I use oak because I like the texture if it does show, and it's also cheaper. But the MDF is very, very stable. And so I also seal all sides of my backer board. And then I cut these, and you can see they were laying out there too. They all get sanded and sealed also because it's important for your frame to not warp also. So these are just things you have to think about when you're working with wood. And it took me a while to get this like standardized process. So this is kind of cool. A friend made these for me. He surprised me. They're the corner clamps. I was using a different type of clamp, and he made those for me. He's big into CNC routers and lasers. And then he took my logo and put it. It was really, really cute. So I'm very proud of my corner clamps. They're custom personalized. So this is what I do: nail gun, glue, just creating a frame. Okay, and then we'll speed this up. The other side has to be done too. You can see on this. This is what it's like. This one I wired both ways because it can go both ways. And I put my initials on the back for that reason. So. Okay, from there, I will glue the frame together. So I just use wood glue for that. And again, that's going on the oak backer board. I have a different nail gun. That's actually a pin nailer. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the pin nailer. It's a great, great little device. It's like 22 gauge nails, and it's so fine that you can't see them. So if you're ever doing any woodwork around the house, you don't want to fill holes and you don't need it to be strong, you can use a pin nailer. So. It's a lot of work to make these frames, but the upside with my art is I don't have to frame them. So a lot of artists have to deal with frames that are quite expensive, and also a lot of work to put together and deal with the glass and the matting and all that. So my work always, I don't frame them because I use different thicknesses. I like the edges to show that there's different types of wood and different thicknesses of wood. So there's that. Okay, next. Here I'm putting it together. This one did not have numbers. It was completely random. So I was going to kind of do a rainbow effect, and then I decided that since they were all made by different artists, that each piece should show. So I was going for opposite ends of the color wheel, like blue, green, and purple. So they would really pop out. Okay, well, speeding this up. You didn't see all my, oh, maybe this one should go here. It actually took a long time. The end was when it was the worst. I was running out of colors, like, oh, move it around. So, but, okay. And done. Okay. Next. So that's how it turned out. So I put that on there for the Zoom viewers, but here it is in person. So, yep, it's going to be auctioned off in Janesville. So I'm dropping it off tomorrow on my way back. So I don't know when, but if you're interested in knowing, let me know and I'll pass along your information. Okay, next. Okay, so I use the CNC. I threw this picture in because this one, I cut, like I'll just use the CNC, which is the computer, when I need to or when it's more efficient. And then I'll hand cut when it's more efficient. And this one, I did both. So all these background pieces, I cut with my machine. I made vector shapes, did that whole process. And again, there's like 3 or 4 different, types of wood. I went in and colored them. And then all these heavier tree trunks are walnut. So those I just cut on a table saw because it's far more efficient just to rip them. And also a thinner blade, uses less waste. So it's just quicker. Okay, next. Okay, so this one I'm going to show you a different technology. This one I did all of this with my machine. Okay, next. You can see it up close. So there's our constellations. I had a lot of fun creating those. Next. What I did for this is I did this on a program. Alfresco, I think is what it's called, Fresco. It's an Adobe free app on my iPad with a pen. And so this was my pattern, right? And I threw it in and then I hand drew all of the constellations. And I had a lot of fun with this. I got the little rocket in there. Some of them are real. I got the Big Dipper, Little Dipper. This is Hercules, okay? But my friend's like, why didn't you make it Turcules? I'm like, oh, all right, because his name is Ted. So I added some turkey feathers to him. So, it's art, right? I have the Southern Cross. It's in a different hemisphere, but it really doesn't matter because it can be what you want it to be. So, okay, next. So this is what it looked like then. So I pulled out the image, right? And so then I had to take this and put it into Illustrator and create vector shapes. So all these turned into vector shapes. Okay, next. And then I actually carved them on this machine. So this is a straight router bit, and this is what I use to cut everything out. It's a 1/8 inch. I use a ton of these. I buy them like 5 at a time. Okay, and so when you do a carve though, okay, next, you can put a different bit in. This is called a V bit. Okay, so what this machine really is used for more than what I use it for is making signs. And people have sign businesses. You see a lot of guys at craft shows that have these wood signs. They all have these CNCs, and you can program them to do all these elaborate carves. I don't do it very much because I just use it for cutting pieces. But next, I think this is a video. I did cut this. This is for the local art hub in town. I just did it as a favor for a friend. So you can see how like it carved out all the background, right? And this was actually a lot to program. It was really a pain. So next. That's what it looks like. I got my mother to help me paint it. Sorry, Mom. So if you're here, you're going to be in the slideshow. It's the best picture I had of it. And, I wasn't making money on this. It was just a favor. So, again, she was around in town like, hey, you want to do a project? So next. That's what it looks like hung up. So I've got some pipes and I put them on there and then we hung it. Just last weekend, actually, we got it hung. So it turned out nice. So that's really, the machine can do a lot. Like I said, I've only had it for a couple years. I want to incorporate more drawing. I like to put texture in with the wood as opposed to just painting a line. So I'm going to be experimenting with that more, but the machine can do a lot and I'm new at it. So it's just an example of what it can do. Okay, next one. Okay, what time is it? Okay, so now we're going to get into the dyeing process. This is something that is very unique to my art. I have them sitting up there. these are wood dyes. This is the Keda dye. This is the package I was talking about, KEEDA, if anyone's interested, and you can buy that on Amazon. These are a little bit more powerful, and these are trans fast and trans tint. You can get them at Woodcraft. I don't know if Rockler carries them, but I get mine from Woodcraft. These are powders, and they're concentrates, okay? And I think these are supposed to be mixed with alcohol, but I mix them with water and it works out just fine. And these are water soluble. And so behind them is where what I have right over there. So what I do is I take these concentrates and I have bottles and I make my own dye. And then from there, I mix my colors. So it's kind of like my palette. And these are little packets. This is how they come, the Keda dyes. So I still use, I don't like the blue or the black, but I do use the red, yellow, and brown from Keda. Okay, next. Okay, here's me coloring this woman, and this is pretty much what it looks like. Well, this is what it looks like. So I have all my colors already mixed, and I just take one piece at a time, and we're gonna do that here a little bit in a minute. Okay, next. Here's a piece I did with a lot of color, and this was my drawing. I think I did this on, for some reason, I did that on tracing paper. That's why it looks that way. Okay, next. And that's what it looks like after I cut it. And it's naked. This is cherry, and the rest of it is all maple, but there are, again, different thicknesses of wood. Okay, next. This is what it looks like in the process. I'm not the neatest, but anyway, so I pre-mix everything. You can't mix on the wood. Once it's on, it's very unforgiving. So the process actually goes pretty fast. I mean, this took a long time, but if you're coloring it, like once it's on, it's on. So if I want to do variation, I have to have like, you know, purple, blue, 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 little lighter blue, lighter, lighter blue, lighter, lighter, lighter blue, you know, and you have to just very, very, very carefully blend it. And then go to the next one, please. And that's how it looks when it's all done. And it dries like kind of powdery, right? Like to me, that's kind of a mess, right? You can tell, and also there's different phases. Like this is when it's wet. This one's much greener, right? Down at the bottom. And then these have dried. So what happens when you're doing a big piece is they start drying. And so you just have to know where you're going. You have to trust it. And there's been so many times I look and I'm like, oh, that's horrible, you know, but you just have to trust that once you put that finish coat, the wood grain is going to come back. The finish coat, depending on what you're using, if you're using an oil base, is going to have a lot of yellow in it too. And it changes it up. So go to the next one. And that's what it looked like when it was done. So it completely, you have to know where you're going, trust what you're doing, and trust that you know in your head what the end result's going to be while you're doing it. So anyway, go back to that one again. So the difference is really striking on this, I think, right? And then go back to the, yeah, thanks. So, okay, so with that, I think I'm going to move over and I have a couple pieces that I'm going to show you how to color. Okay. Always, I live in these. My Bitmoji has a apron. Okay. Oh, wait, is this messing up with this? Okay. Okay, so I have here, let me see what you can see. Okay, so I just brought this piece because it's kind of fun to see them naked, right? So this is what it looks like. This is 11 by 11. This is one of my love pieces, and they are, you know, they're loose, okay? It's like a puzzle, right? All different thicknesses of plywoods. These are all plywoods. This is cherry veneer. The rest of it is maple. Down in the corner here, I have my initials. So this is my little logo. This is another thing, like with the frame, I had to figure out how to sign my art. And, you know, a pen on a finished wood really wouldn't look nice, or just a paint, you know, sticking to a polyurethane finish. So I have an old-fashioned branding stick that I had made, and I use a blowtorch, heat it up, and that's how I do it. So I do this before the finishing process, obviously. I have forgotten, and I go back and it melts the polyurethane, then I have to sand it and all that. But so it can be done later. Okay, so let me get my glasses. funny, I normally don't sit to do this, but my table's higher, so. Okay, so what I have here, we're gonna start out with this one. Okay, this one, I have some of the pieces painted that are gonna be painted black and white. This is Another Love. And we're gonna do a color block. So I have all these themes that I do. I think I can show you right here. These are just prints, but I do these in themes, like this was Rainbow Love. This is Love in Color Block, this one right here. So we're gonna do this one, so we're gonna start out with something really simple here. So these are my colors, okay? So I've got all these little containers that I use. Actually, oops, should move this out of the way, so I'm just gonna splash on it. Okay, I have gloves. Oops. Oh, it can be messy. And this stuff, I always wear gloves. It does stain your hands. So like if you get it on a surface and its surface is finished and sealed, you can wipe it off if you wipe it right away. But if you don't, it will stain it. So, and it comes off your hands eventually, but it just takes like a day. So I wear lots of gloves all the time.
Jill, speaking of protecting your hands, someone is asking, how do you keep from ruining your manicure as you're sanding and using the polyurethane?
Well, truth be told, I painted my nails before I came here. So yeah, I do wreck my nails a lot. I always have to use gel because I use my hands so much and gel's real. And I keep my nails really, really short, but that is true. I always nick them with the sander, especially that belt sander. Your fingers just get, but it's just part of it. It's okay.
Thank you. And just a reminder for those folks that have questions, if you're in our virtual audience, please type those into the Q&A. If you're in our in-person audience, please just raise your hand and I'd be happy to come over to you with the microphone. All right, thanks so much, Jill.
Okay, I'm going to start out with mixing my colors. I'm going to start out with a red. These are the brushes I use. They are just watercolor brushes, really. And some of them are really good quality. Some of them are really cheap. I like sometimes how they bounce back, the cheaper fibers. It depends. So it's just the feel. But they're my favorites. So I always have a little piece of wood. I'll check the color out. This one I'm going to make a little stronger. So I have my concentrate, and I'm actually going to add to it. Okay. A little stronger. So I have two different types. I use the Cater red and I use this red, and one's like got a little more orange in it, one's got a little more pink in it. So I like to mix them. Okay, next we're going to mix our blue. Blues are really, really, really tough because when you finish the wood, the yellow in the wood comes out, and if you use an oil-based polyurethane, that also yellows the blue, and you end up with blue-green. So sometimes I'll use a water-based polyurethane. Sometimes I'll add just a little bit of white pigment. This one is strong enough, so it'll be okay. If it's a real strong blue like this, it'll be okay. And I'm gonna, oh, I didn't bring my blue, so I guess I'm stuck with that one. Okay, I'm gonna actually add a little bit of this. This is like a turquoise. Next is gold. This is just like paints, right? Like I want to make a gold. I have a bright yellow here. I'm going to start out with my yellow. Okay. Add just warm it up with just a touch of red. Okay. A little bit of brown. Try that. Okay, so there's a nice gold. So I'll show you like what the color, the yellow is really bright. It's really electric. Can you see that on there? Yeah, so really, really bright. And for this, I don't want something that bright. It's pretty for its, has its purpose, but so now what we're gonna do is go to our shapes. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any dye on my gloves. And so I'm gonna take We'll take the red first. Okay. There's no dust on it. And it's very, very simple. It goes very, very fast. You just start coloring it. And this is a lot like watercolor. I feel like sometimes, you know, like my art is kind of like creating my canvas out of wood first and then coming back and coloring the pieces. It's like watercolor. The pieces, you know, it stops the dye from bleeding. From here, then I always do the edges because it makes it a lot more finished. Okay, can you see this? Okay. You have to wet the entire piece. Again, that's like watercolor. If you only do a part of it, then it will like water stain, like have that, you know, edge like in watercolor. So you can go back and you can revisit the pieces but you just have to wet the whole thing. Otherwise it won't dry right. So go through, make sure it's even. Okay. And there's one piece. Set that aside. Okay. Forgot to make my orange, didn't I? I can come back to that. Okay, so got a bucket here. I always get dye in my hands. Okay, so now we're gonna take the yellow pieces right here and this one. Do the same thing. It goes really fast. If you're just doing straight color, it actually goes really, really fast. And it actually dries really fast. So what's nice about this, the water dries really quickly, and then you can put a coat of spray polyurethane on them, and you know, in about 3 hours, you can be putting your first coat of brushing on your polyurethane. So with traditional oil-based stains, typically you have to wait 24 hours before you can start your finish coats. So sometimes like when I'm doing, you know, just staining something brown, I'll use the water, my brown stains, even though I have a ton of oil-based stains, I'll use these because it's faster. And something else about using these stains as or dyes as opposed to stain is that it's much more even on the grain. I don't have anything here, but like my frames, I use just a pine, a clear pine. And sometimes I will take my brown dye and dye them. You know how anyone works with wood, you have like, you use oil-based stain on pine and it gets all splotchy. Well, you use a dye and it's pretty smooth. It's really pretty. It's kind of cool. Yeah, and it's still, the grain comes out, it's still beautiful. So I use that a lot. Okay. My blue piece is right here. Edges. Okay, and that's that. So I'll set that there to dry. Okay, I'm gonna mix my orange real quick and peach. If you can see that. Oh, you can't see this picture, but there's some orange and some peach in here that I'm gonna do real quick. So funny, this fluorescent lighting is different than my lighting. My colors are so much dingier in here than they are in my workshop. Okay, still. Okay. These here. Okay, so now I'm just need to make a peach. So it's just watering it down, just like watercolor. So. I want to add one more red to that. Warm it up. Okay, pretty. Take this. Make sure my edges are all done. My very first exhibition. Oh, I have a little bit of blue on there. See, now I messed that up. Another artist came and told me, like, oh, you should do your edges. And so I'll never forget that. So she was right. So I always do my edges. And it does, it makes it so much more finished. So. Huh? Not the backs. Nope, not the backs. Just the backs get glued on. Okay, so I'm gonna set that one aside. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna let these dry, and then before, got a little dye on there. When we, before when in I don't know, a few minutes or so, they'll be dry enough that we can set them together and you can see what it'll look like all together. Okay, so the next one I have this one right here. This one says hope. Can you see that? So H-O-P and E. Okay, so I have these ready painted, and for this one, I am going to use one of my little thumbprints. So this is actually what I use. So here, they're very small. That's how I like to work. I printed this out and I'm like messing around with color, and I circled this one. This is the one we're doing today. Okay, so this one is a little more involved. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to set this over here. We don't need it anymore. So this one has purples and pinks and reds. Hands a little bit. Okay.
Jill, how many pieces do you normally, are you normally working on at a time?
I really only usually work on one or two. Really one. I've tried to do multiple pieces and it gets very confusing for me. So if I'm doing these small ones, I might do like 4 at a time because there's only 16 pieces. But I just finished one that had like 350 pieces in it. And I'm working on one right now that I'm going to show you that has. So when I have it that big, it's first of all, it takes over my studio. And then once I start polyurethaning, I can't cut because of the dust. So it's kind of a one project at a time, typically.
And what's the largest piece that you've done? You mentioned.
I have a picture of it. I'll show you later. It has like 550 pieces. It was, I don't know, 68 inches by 28 inches. So, okay. So we get to start mixing our colors. Here we got oranges, reds, purples. Okay. So we're going to do kind of, can you see this? Is this in? Okay. This little, it goes purple, pink, orange. So for this one, we're going to use a lot of different containers. I have 2 different types of purples. For my test, it's a little dark. I'm going to add some water to it. a little dark. Okay, so then from here, what I'm going to do with this one is I'm just going to mix in some pink. Which really isn't pink. It's really hard to do pink on wood. And lighten it a little more. So we have like a little transition. Okay. And then I do it again. I'll mix some of it. Gradually add my colors.
Jill, as you were setting up, I believe you said that many of your pieces are commissions.
Yes.
And then do you send them throughout the country? Are they?
Um,
Or
sometimes, yes, sometimes. Yep, I just sent one to Rhode Island. I had to build a crate. That was a new experience for me. So yeah, yes. You know, a lot of them are local though too, because I really only do like art festivals in the Midwest. So
and then, of course, we're curious about the price point.
well, I'm a new artist. So I watched this podcast, you know, like how to become an artist. And, you know, the guy was like, sell cheap first, you know. So I did. I started out pretty cheap and my prices have more than doubled in 2 years. So that is good. So I kind of price them per like how many pieces of wood, right? Like I have one that my sister's delivering for me. Thank you, sister, because it's in the city. And that one had over 300 pieces of wood, actually more like, 350. So I charged $3,500 for it. So I have another one with over 500 pieces of wood for 5,000. So it depends, you know, it is something. I know all artists, when you start out, how do you price your art? And, you know, you second guess yourself. And so I just started out cheap. Like my daughter, I remember saying, Mom, you know, your prices online are way too cheap. That's way too cheap for a piece of art. I'm like, well, I have to start selling art somewhere, you know. And so it's been a process. So you just start selling it just to be selling it. And then you start creating a lot more art and you get better at it. And then you slowly bring your prices up. And then you have no art left, so you have to charge more. So I don't know if that answers your question. Red. Oh, sorry, I'm getting there. So what I'm doing is I'm setting this up. So I have all my colors, right? A little bit of red, then into orange again, and okay, one more. Okay, one more, and then we're ready to go.
I think we've got another question here.
Yes.
When you're all done, do you ever figure out what you've made per hour of labor?
I don't think I want to. I was keeping track of hours and it just kind of like frightened me. So I just stopped like, oh, it is very time consuming. So I have been able to make a profit this year. But yeah, not really, no. So, okay, so here's what I do. Once I have all my colors, I kind of start out like kind of just seeing how they're going to all flow, right? Make sure I got the flow right, because again, you can only do it once, right? You got one shot at it. Otherwise, you've got to go back and cut another piece. So that looks pretty good to me. See how it goes in that. And so this is how many colors it takes just to do that. So that's why when I have a whole tray of colors, that's what I'm doing. So now I'm going to take my piece. Okay. And I'm actually going to use a little bigger brush on that one. Okay. And I'm going to start out with my purples. So you just have to do it very, very gradually and just kind of mix into the next one and just keep going, just real gradual, right? More purple up there, just following my little 2-inch drawing here. Slowly, slowly, keep moving down and keep mixing. And that's how you get that effect. And then you can go back with a dry brush and try to blend it even more. That in there. Move it all the way through. And then you have it. Whoops. Didn't do that. Wipe that up. Okay, and so now the trick is to paint the edges. So now I got to go back, and it's actually pretty easy to blend it, but I just go back in, right? Take all my colors. I just do the same thing all the way down the edge, right? And just kind of blend it. And it gives it kind of a cool effect to have it blended all the way down like that. Try to match it. Okay. That's how it works. Then this side's easy. This side's just all purple. I'm gonna take my purple. You have to do it all while it's wet, and you got to work really quick, because once it starts drying, like I said, you'll get those watermarks. You just want to keep everything a little damp while you're working. So that's why I draw everything out, because you just have to know where you're going before, or you're going to go through a lot of wood, which is expensive and time consuming.
Jill, do I
Mhm.
remember you saying that you do not have formal art training?
Right.
So how did you learn to do this?
A lot of trial and error. I don't know. I grew up, my mom's a bit of an artist. She's like a hobby artist too. So I don't know. I always like to draw and stuff. So, it's kind of funny when I was trying to figure out this art, I watched a lot of, YouTube videos and podcasts, and it's all woodworking stuff. So, okay, so there's that piece. And then we're going to go in and do this next piece. How much time do we have? Oh, you know what? I don't know. I'll be quick. I'll be quick. This is really fast. So I'm just going to use the colors I already mixed here. I'm going to just go like that. It's kind of a red, orange into an orange. Okay. Do the edges real quick. That one, and then yellow. This one, we start out yellow. Blend it slightly. That with this color. Here, well, I'm not going to have time to show you this, but there's also other techniques where you can, this is water, haha, but this has more of a watercolor technique. And so another technique would be to just wet the wood first, and then you come in with your colors. And then these are highly, highly saturated. And so you just play around with it, again, a lot like watercolor, but you just have to be careful because you can't mix it all on the wood. It turns really dirty really fast. So. Get our edges. That one. The last color is a pink, which is really, really hard to do on wood. So I have this little product that I found. It's only like $6.25 at Woodcraft. It's Mixel, and it's considered a wood dye, but it's got a little opacity to it. So it's white. And so you just add that little bit of white in, and it will, I'm just gonna dump this. I'll show you how that works. So you can still see the wood grain through it, but that's how I make my pink. I need to add just a little, what did I use? This one? Sorry, almost done here. This is also a good trick if you're using blues. This is what I was talking about, is adding just a little bit of this white pigment in, and it just changes it up. So it changes the world. So otherwise, I can show you, this light pink really looks dirty on the wood because so much of the yellow in the wood comes through. It's just really hard to get a nice pink. So I will use a lot of this white here and there. So, okay. Okay, I think. So now, this is my mess. You can see it all out there, but that's how I work. And so then it looks like my workshop, right? So I can put this together so you can see. This one isn't completely dry. You can see, oh, this isn't under here, is it? You can see like some of the coloration in here. Sometimes it takes a little while to dry. So that's what that is. Goes here like that. This little piece. But they're pretty dry. Like I wouldn't polyurethane them yet, but they dry pretty fast, which is really nice. There's the blue. Oh, it's my head in the way, probably. Okay. And that's what it looks like when it's all together. Now, all of this will get polyurethaned. So this cherry in here will come right out and be really beautiful. And everything will richen up around it. But that's it. So then I will make a frame for this, and then I will glue all this on. I use E6000 glue. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a craft glue, right? I have a friend who's a carpenter who gave me that tip. He used to do a lot of like custom paneling and stuff in the city in Chicago. And that's what they use all the time. He's like, that stuff sticks. So in my house, I actually made a bunch of walnut paneling about 10 years ago, and it still sticks. So I've never had a piece come off. So unless I forgot to glue it, so which has happened. So, okay, I'm gonna let those dry. Let's go back to the video. I think we have to keep moving here. So that's my dye process. If you have any questions later, I'm sure my information, if you want to, about products and stuff, you can let me know. Okay. So I have a few more slides. Okay, so, okay. That is a mess. It varies,
So the question,
Oh, sorry,
was-
Jane, you have to speak in the microphone.
Run me through a typical day. Like, how many hours are you working in your workshop?
Well, I would love to be there more. I don't know. It varies. Sometimes, like I've been hitting it really hard lately, unfortunately. Sometimes, what I do a lot is I'll put a coat of polyurethane at night very late to like midnight and 1 a.m. and then I'll go to bed and wake up in 7 hours and it's ready for the next coat. So since it's part of my house, it's really sporadic. I try to get out there early, but sometimes I spend a lot of time on my computer working on the design or at my table with my colored pencils. So it's not all in the studio, but a lot of hours. I'm sorry, that really doesn't answer the question, does it? Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. So these are my finishes. I've tried a bunch of finishes, and my favorite is the Minwax, and it's readily available at our local Ace Hardware in case I run out. So that's good too. Right now, what I have in my studio is the Varathane brand. This is water-based. This is the spray. And this is the General Finishes water-based satin. And, I'm a huge, for oil-based stains, I am a huge General Finishes fan. Their gel stain is fabulous. So I went and invested in that, and it's like twice as expensive as the Minwax, and there's really no difference. So when I go to replace this, I'll replace it again with Minwax. So this is the spray that I use. So I'll take those pieces home, the colored ones, and I'll lay them all out, and I will spray them, and then do the same process. Okay, next. It's stuck. I wish I had more information about polyurethane. I had pieces I was going to bring, and pieces that I did a couple years ago when I was experimenting. Like I would really like to just go with all water-based because of the fumes, right? But it just isn't. There just isn't as rich. And then after a couple years, I mean, the difference though is it yellows so much more than you think. So sometimes, like there's a piece in here with a lot of blues, I will use the clear water-based. So, okay, this is a video. So this is Nefertiti making her, and this is the color process. Oh, go back. There. Oh, it's not working? That's okay. I just showed, like, there are pictures of it. Yeah, here she goes. So that was the color process on her. So, okay, next. So here's what I have right now in my studio. This is my little drawing. It's another bird piece, and they're actually ducks. It's for some duck hunters that are from Canada. And so I changed my geese to ducks, and it's a little bigger piece. And here's my colored pencils. I get all my color work done first. Okay, next. Here's my palette that I put together. And so I was talking about with the blue, I put some white in the blue. Okay, here are my purples, reds, into red, oranges, yellows. Okay, next. And this is the process. So I have everything out. Here's my drawing. I have my iPad because I did a piece similar. So I'm looking at some of that coloring. And one triangle at a time, just like I was doing here. So that's what I'm doing right now. So next. So here's a picture of me standing up on my table. I spend a lot of time on my stool because I have to work flat. So I have to look down. So I'm always up and down on the stool, taking pictures because I can't just stand away. That's one of the challenges with working flat. Another challenge I have with wood is the fact that wood, expands and contracts and warps. So all of my pieces, there is just a slight space in between each piece. I don't put them all together because if you put them too tight, they will expand and pop off in the summers. So there's just a couple things, that you have to think about if you're going to work with wood. Okay, next. Another one, oh yeah, so they do warp, especially when I'm using like thin stock and I'm getting it wet, right? It's going to warp. And then so I use a lot of weights when I adhere it. And the type of glue I use, it's a gel glue. And so why it's unlike wood glue is that it doesn't harden. It takes like an hour to set, and then it takes, the downside, it takes at least 24 hours to dry, but I can go back and slightly move it. right? And on top of that, with wood glue, you have to clamp it down, right? With this, there's body to it and you do not need to clamp the wood. So I use a lot of weights. Next, please. That's what it looks like when I, so I got all these weights all over. So these are actually like for fishing. I went on Etsy and I was like looking, I just, searched lead, small weights, and I came up with these fishing weights. I think they're used for like ice fishing to take the, I don't know. So, and then I put like parchment paper underneath them so they don't damage my finishes. So I use a lot of those little ones and then big ones, hand weights, whatever I have around. So next. So here's, I just threw, we're getting towards the end here. I have just some art, extra art. I threw this one in because I really liked the denim look. I did that all with the wood dyes. I did a quilt series, and so this was like a variation on the denim, on the schoolhouse block. Anyone familiar with quilting? What I do really is like, I call this a wood quilt when there's a pattern, it's very similar to quilting. You're taking different wood species, just like different fabrics, and putting it together. But I had a book on geese bend. Anyone familiar with those? Are these old primitive, really cool quilts that are kind of modern, but really primitive and really made from old clothing. And so I just loved the denim look from there, and that's where that came from. So next. Okay, this one is my blue piece, and this one I did use the water-based finish, and I did that because of the blues. Like, this is all wood dyed, and if I used it just wouldn't be as bright. So, but yet there's not as much depth that you can see in the wood grain as some of the, like, you see like in this piece, because that's an example of the water-based. And this was my son. He was in college at the time, and I'm like, Dean, I need a picture of a dude walking. And I'm like, I want him to be tall. I want him to look lanky. He's like, lanky's my specialty because he's really tall and thin. So he sent me a bunch of pictures of him walking. And then he was so disappointed that he was that small. I was like, what? So it just like, I just needed a little depth. So I did that with pyrography. So I do a little pyrography too. So next. Okay, so this one is a landscape based on like sand dunes in the desert, right? So I looked for those shapes, and I obviously did this one on my machine because these cuts would have been impossible. However, all this I had to hand cut because it's just way too small and tight. So I spent a lot of time just on that little piece there, but that's all acrylic paint, a little bit of wood dye. I think the reds were wood dyes, but you can't really tell in here. That's all wood dye. And then this is just natural mahogany in between. So next one, please. I like to do a lot of perspective. This one was called One Door Down. And on this one, I actually have a little bit of encaustic. And this piece too, I use encaustic. I don't know if everyone know what encaustic is. Hot wax. Where you melt the wax and you mix it with oil paint. It's beeswax and resin. And you can come up later and feel that. It has a nice texture to it. It's made with layers of wax, and you put it on and it's like a candle, like it's like candle wax, and it dries all clumpy, and then you take a blowtorch and smooth it out. And then you put another layer and smooth it out. And I like the thickness of it, and then you polish it like a wax, like polishing a car, right? Or furniture wax. And the finish is a lot like the satin finish on my wood. So I used encaustic for that. And then this is cold wax, and this is all cold wax. So I like mixing mediums. I like mixing, like doing perspective where you can look at it in their frames, but yet there's also depth. I really enjoy architecture. So I do several of these pieces. Okay, next. Oh, there's that one. So you can see it from a distance. Okay, we can move on. Oh, this is the one with 500 pieces, 550 pieces. So I had read a book about migration and just about how difficult it is to track these birds, and how birds, some of them are, becoming close to extinct because they travel to so many environments. And so it inspired me to do this piece. So I was like, this is my first triangle bird piece. And I was like, how can I make birds on wood and with shapes? And so this was the very first one I did. And now I've done a lot of them. So again, this is 2 types of ebony, and this is all maple. And this is all natural. I didn't color anything. It's just the, maple will, like all wood, not all wood. Walnut actually lightens with age. Maple will darken. So some of these pieces are like a little darker maple. Okay, next. Oh, those are my besties. If you're here, I put you in the slideshow. So this was just a local exhibition I had at that art hub. And so I just threw it in there. So thank you for coming. I have so much support between my family and my friends. I can't even, you can see how much, you know, people just, they attend my art shows like, oh, another art show, another event, and clean my studio. My sister from Boston, she came in last Christmas and helped me sand. She's like, I'll help you sand after Christmas. And I'm like, okay. So I had a whole box of shapes and we sanded for a couple days, hand sanded. So anyway, so I couldn't do without all the support I have around me. So I think that is it. I think this was my last. Oh, well, I don't know if we have time. I threw this in here because at the last workshop, I don't know if anyone's interested. This is how I started my art career. And so if anyone has any questions about that, like this was my first year. This is everything I did my first year. So like I said, I listened to a lot of podcasts on how to be an artist. This guy, Mark DeLazio, he is an American, but he lives in France. He is a painter, beautiful painter. And he has a tremendous blog about art and about photography. And it's like an hour or 2 hours long. And he tells you everything you need to do to take professional pictures of your art. And the name of the game is to have good photographs because you're juried for everything, right? Every exhibition, getting into art festivals, you need to have good pictures. That's all they see. They don't see the originals. So I did everything this man said to do, including buying the used camera. He bought a used camera. I bought the same one because I don't know anything about photography. So I'm like, I'm just going to set it up exactly the way he did. And so I bought these like 1980s, 1990s DSL camera, and it works beautifully. The battery life is short. I could get a new battery, but I don't need it. I only use it for art. And he'll go into everything from like polarized lenses, the type of lens to use. It's really, if I, take down his name if you're interested in photographing your art or you don't know how to photograph your art. I got a new website through Art Storefronts. I opened a Facebook and Instagram business account. I posted my first reel. I used my first hashtag. I didn't even know what a hashtag was. Really, it's been a long 2 years. I did my first art giveaway. So, okay, so I don't know if anyone's familiar with Art Storefronts. There's several businesses out there. And so this guy created this business. What I liked about it is he was in the print industry and he saw how artists were not making money on their art, but galleries and printers were, right? So he started a company for artists to help them out. And it's a service and it really isn't even that expensive. And so I paid a fee and then I pay a monthly fee and they completely set up my website for me with, credit cards and everything all set up. I didn't have to do it because there's so much you have to do. It's like running a small business, right? So for me, and they have a marketing program. They taught me all about social media, what hashtags were, what to do. So I really think that they're a good company. There's others out there. So I got a Wisconsin seller's permit. My accountant told me I need to do that. I bought a used tent and pro panels. So I had a friend that did art festival. She's like, this is what you need to do. I'm not young, so I didn't want to mess around. I went and got the best. And she was right. To get into the better art festivals, you need to have the better setup. The better setup costs about $5,000. So Aaron, again, drove with me to Iowa and Springfield. And I got used pro panels, which are the panels in the tent and the tent for like $1,700. And so and they work great. They're great. Did 3 art festivals, won 2 awards. That was my first year. I got hooked up with a design company at Art Fair on the Square, and they sponsored me for, MoMA is the Museum of Modern Art in Madison. They have a gallery night, so I got to do that. I sold art in 2 galleries. I had my first solo exhibition, and in total, I sold 38 original artworks. So that was my first year. So I don't know if anyone's interested in turning their hobby into a profession, but those are the steps that I took. It's kind of overwhelming to start, like, okay, where do I start? How do I get into a gallery? So that's the route that I chose. So if anyone is interested in anything, have any questions about that?
We do have a couple questions from our virtual audience. Someone is asking, do you paint with the grain? Do you tend to paint?
No, I paint with the color. You know what I mean? If I'm doing a blend, you don't have to paint with the grain. No, no, you sand with the grain.
Okay, and the brand or type of glue that you use again?
It's E6000 and it's available at every single craft store and hardware store. The cheapest place to buy it is Menards. It is. I go grab them all and put them in my basket. I've tried to buy it wholesale and I can't find it anywhere. And you can, like I'm working on I have another big project. It's a door, it's a barn door. And so I'm gonna buy, you can, like when I did my paneling, you can get it like in a big tube, like a caulk, you can use a caulk gun with it too. So.
And while we're talking about materials, what type of water-based stain do you use?
I use the Keda dyes, Keda, and I also use the trans tint. It's these, I don't know if you can see them. They're available at Woodcraft and they're water soluble. That's what they are. And they just come in little concentrated bottles. Like that. And they're not cheap. They're like $25. But they last, they go far. Yeah. Oh,
Okay, just a moment.
After you mix your colors, is evaporation an issue? You know, for your larger projects, they have to sit out a while.
yeah, yeah. I have caps for them. So yes, it can be an issue. So like if I'm not done, I will cap them before I go to bed and then get up the next day. And I'll just add a little more water, but yes, they will evaporate. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, let me just check the chat and the Q&A one more time. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jill. We really appreciate your time. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.